You are listening to 106.7, Wilmington's Big Talker, and my name is Paul Vallone. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. And I'd like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine at Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of people from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. For the main part of our show today, we're going to talk about a unique opportunity to help you increase your preparedness skills should the doo-doo hit the fan, including discussion of what, for me, was a perception-altering book, namely 1 Second After. Then we'll talk about the latest leftist lies in their quest to control you, in this case from the militants calling themselves People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Now, the antics of PETA used to be cute and laughable in their cluelessness. But what I'm about to tell you will likely enrage you, while showing what a threat they are becoming to Western society. After that, we're going to talk a little bit about what PETA has in common with other leftist organizations and what the leftists really want. Now, in gun rights news, the leftists have now figured out how to roll all of their perceived villains into one master plot, giving them a hoped-for twofer when it comes to Russian collusion. The answer? The NRA did it. Yes, the leftists are now trying to spread the phony Russian collusion scandal to include, believe it or not, the NRA. According to Bloomberg News, yes, that's the news network of anti-gun zealot and billionaire Michael Bloomberg, meaning none of this can be considered remotely credible, the Federal Bureau of Investigation is reportedly, and this, by the way, is a quote, the Federal Bureau of Investigation is reportedly investigating whether the NRA helped funnel money from Russians into the election, which would violate U.S. election law prohibiting the use of foreign money. In recent years, the NRA has developed relationships with several well-connected Russians, including Alexander Torshin, an ally of President Vladimir Putin, who is deputy governor of the Russian Central Bank. Torshin, who has been implicated in money laundering by Spanish authorities, is also an NRA member. Well, I guess that ought to be grounds for prosecuting him right there. In 2016, he is reported to have met with Donald Trump Jr. at the NRA's annual meeting in Kentucky, and in 2015, NRA leaders met with Torshin in Moscow. The NRA has said that the FBI has not contacted it about Russian funds. Curiously, however, the gun group has so far failed to take the simple step of denying that it accepted Russian money at all. The NRA reported spending more than $55 million in the 2016 election, including $30 million on Trump, more than the organization has spent on any candidate in its history. That's from Bloomberg News. And by the way, I thank the NRA for spending $55 million on the 2016 election in order to keep Hillary Clinton out of office. But for her, I can guarantee you that her next Supreme Court appointment would have made sure that we overturned the Heller decision, and your right to keep and bear arms would be meaningless. Now, ignoring for a moment that the assertions I just listed our utter speculation without a shred of evidence. What Bloomberg and company neglect to mention is that because the NRA is a 501c4 not-for-profit organization, it is extremely limited in using organizational money to impact elections. Its Political Action Committee, the NRA Political Victory Fund, which does spend money on direct expenditures to impact elections, cannot take foreign money, and I can guarantee you Mr. Torshin and his Russian central bank are nowhere in the FEC filings because that would be a violation of FEC regulations. In any case, of the money the NRA spent on elections, probably somewhere north of $55 million, for which I thank them, the vast majority goes not directly to candidates whose donations are severely restricted by FEC regulations, but rather to independent expenditures in which ads and other candidate promotions may not be coordinated with the candidate they benefit. Oh, and in general, given recent developments, you can put me on record as saying that there was indeed Russian collusion, but it wasn't with the Trump campaign. It was between the Russians, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and the upper levels of both the FBI and the Justice Department. Meanwhile, old Vlad the Impaler, Vladimir Putin, is still laughing. With the Democrats as his patsy, he is playing both ends against the middle in a historic disinformation campaign which is proving quite effective in undermining faith in the American democratic process. On a different note, the next time an anti-gun acquaintance sneers at the inevitability of gun registration preceding confiscation, point to California, where, on the heels of recent and ever more draconian gun control, officials lament that they don't have the resources to confiscate guns fast enough. Now, this is from the Associated Press, and I quote, "Authorities seized more than 24 guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition from a California man nearly 5 months after a judge barred him from having firearms." And by the way, they don't say why a judge barred him. This could be for the flimsiest and most ridiculous of reasons. Highlighting a backlog in the state system meant to seize guns from those who aren't allowed to have them, which, if California has its way, will be everybody. So, 24 guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition. I guess that makes me a multiple felon. Now, before you say, well, those are prohibited people who shouldn't have guns, consider that the list of prohibited people is whatever the government says it is. And I can assure you, it will never get smaller. According to California Attorney General Xavier Becerra, since 2013, his agents have seized more than 18,000 guns. On a different note, as you probably know, after passage of the so-called NICS Improvement Act of 2007, by which states and other entities are required to report mental health data for inclusion in the computerized National Instant Background Check System, the Obama administration required the Veterans Administration to report 260,381 veterans who had appointed fiduciaries to handle their finances and who were then permanently barred from owning guns. Early versions of the legislation to restore their rights were introduced under the name the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act and were sponsored by our own Senator Richard Burr, but frankly were largely cynical ploys because they involved legislation Burr knew would never get a hearing, much less pass. Well, now in Congress, where such legislation has at least a slim chance of passage, Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, has introduced bipartisan legislation along with Senator Joni Ernst, also Republican Iowa, and Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat, West Virginia, to restore veterans' Second Amendment rights. The bill is the Veterans Second Amendment Rights Restoration Act of 2018, and, among other things, would place the burden of proof on the VA to demonstrate that someone is a danger to self or others, as defined in 18 U.S. Code Section 922, before they could be reported to NICS, and would provide an avenue for veterans already on the list to regain their rights. So contact your U.S. senators, for North Carolina, of course, that would be Richard Burr and Thom Tillis, and tell them to support Grassley's bill. Right now, we're going to take a break. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. We'll take a short break, after which we will resume with a discussion of what you can and should do to strengthen your prepping skills. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Sponsored by Hyatt Gun Shop, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Now, I've never been much of a conspiracy theorist. Frankly, I think that by and large, people are too stupid to keep a secret. And beyond watching a few episodes of Doomsday Preppers, I've never worried much about asteroids, the shift of magnetic poles, or other end-of-the-world scenarios. That said, however, about 10 years ago, when riots broke out through Britain, at the same time the Occupy movement began rioting here, it became clear to my wife and I that experiencing a degradation of services provided by our society, things like power, food, water, and medical care, could be a distinct possibility. So we gradually became preppers, those people often depicted as paranoid nutcases who exercise some measure of preparedness just in case. But then I read a book entitled 1 Second After. The author is Dr. William Forstchen. Now, people had been recommending this book for years, and I kind of went, yeah, I figured it was some badly written, self-published piece of conspiracy theory, and I never read it. Until finally somebody mentioned it yet again. I happened to be in a Barnes & Noble, and I asked if they had the book. Well, they did. And then I realized it had been on the New York Times bestseller list, and the foreword was written by Newt Gingrich. Okay, they had my attention. Now, imagine my surprise when I read this book and realized that in thinking I was prepared, I was dead wrong. The book is set in Black Mountain, North Carolina, our own Black Mountain, and the scenario is that one day, as life ticks on normally, the lights go out. All the lights go out. All the electronics stop running. All the cars stop running. Everything grinds to a halt. And stays that way, because you later find out that someone has set off an EMP device, electromagnetic pulse, over the United States and destroyed not only the power grid, but all functioning, microchip electronics. Now, lest you consider this unlikely, consider a 2008 report to the U.S. House Armed Services Committee entitled Threat Posed by Electromagnetic EMP Attack. I won't belabor the discussion with descriptions of Russian and possibly North Korean super EMP weapons, but the bottom line is that we aren't talking about being without power for a few days or weeks. We're talking about months or even years. I'm told that transformers are reportedly made in China and take months to manufacture. By some estimates, 90% of the American population will perish in the first year. The biggest reason, of course, being that our chain of delivery for food, medicines, and other essential items is just in time. So when trucks and ships stop running, because after all, they're now electronically controlled, then of course we have no food, we have no water, we have no medicines. Then of course we have all the people who are being maintained by modern medicine, be it those on pacemakers, diabetics, cancer survivors, or a host of other problems that require regular medical maintenance. By the time I was done, I had read both that novel and Forstchen's sequels, which are 1 year after and The Final Day. Let me tell you, if you're looking for a light read, they aren't it. In a classic plot sequence, every novel has that dark moment followed by the resolution. In 1 second after, they are just about all dark moments, the reason being that if the lights go out under this scenario, what happens next will be catastrophic to our society. Forstchen's first book is commonly credited for, if not beginning the prepper movement, at least increasing its size dramatically. It has done so not only because it's extremely well written, but utterly realistic and plausible. And we have both seen Dr. Forstchen speak and met him, and he is a highly credible individual. If you get a chance, check out the book, or, as I'm about to mention, meet him in person. Now, enter the Heritage Life Skills Festival in Western North Carolina, Waynesville to be exact. My wife, Lori, and I are new to it, having attended for the first time just last year. This is the 7th year that Carolina Readiness Supply is holding the event, and it will be held at the Folk Moot Center in Waynesville on the weekend of April 27th through April 29th. This is a big event with lots of skill-building courses available that should even appeal to non-preppers. The courses range from literally Preparedness 101 to bread baking, wilderness first aid, building a survival home manual, canning fruits and vegetables or meats, cybersecurity, everyday carry, beekeeping, fire starting, house of worship security, kind of a timely topic, knots, land navigation, on and off-grid solar systems, primitive shelters, rainwater catchment systems, and, of course, my own personal favorite, gun laws for preppers, getting ready, not arrested. But then I'm teaching that one, so I guess I'm biased. The other truly cool thing at the event will be the presentation by Dr. William Forstchen, who is a professor of history at Montreat College and author of 1 Second After and the book's 2 sequels, which again were 1 year after and The Final Day. I plan on recording interviews at the event, including hopefully with Dr. Forstchen. Meanwhile, you can get more information about the Heritage Life Skills Festival at carolinareadiness.com. Now let's talk about bunny huggers. I used to lampoon the crazy antics of bunny huggers, literally hanging out in demonstrations naked in the Alaska winter, wearing only signs that say, "I'd rather freeze than wear fur," or streaking through the GOP convention in cow suits. Or, of course, we had the Hollywood hypocrites attending animal rights galas wearing leather shoes. Now, for a laugh, you can check out my website at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, spell out that and, gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, and you can read a piece entitled, "Sorry Bunny Huggers, Animals Don't Have Rights." But that was the 1990s. In recent years, leftists in general and animal militants in particular have become decidedly unfunny, fraudulent, and even dangerous. First, we have the Humane Society of the United States, or HSUS. This is not to be confused with your local Humane Society, as the local Humane Societies will quickly tell you, because your local Humane Society gets little or no funding from HSUS. I'm sure you've seen the Humane Society TV ads. Sad-eyed, cold, mangy and abused puppies and kittens, often staring out from cages, tearing at your heartstrings. As an animal lover, they get me every time. I could see the messages, Don't I Deserve a Home Too? Or Desperately in Need of a Loving, Caring Family. Meanwhile, a soundtrack plays the sad, soulful music of Sarah McLachlan. Then, of course, comes the website and the phone number where you can assuage your guilt by sending money, preferably $19 a month. The problem, of course, is the Humane Society of the United States doesn't operate any animal shelters and gives less than 1% of its money to such shelters. In fact, according to HumaneWatch.org, of that $19 a month they ask you to send in their nationally televised ads, the lion's share goes not for animals, but for lobbyists. In case you haven't seen it, there's a Humane Watch Super Bowl spoof, Lawyers in Cages, that pretty much says it all. It depicts poor downtrodden lawyers and an HSUS spokesman saying they need your $19 a month to hire more of the poor lawyers. Of the HSUS, it says, we're basically PETA with suits and deodorant. In truth, your donations to HSUS go toward the millions of dollars they spend on lobbyists to drive livestock farmers out of business and pass anti-hunting legislation. Yes, HSUS is indeed PETA with suits and deodorant. Right now, we're going to take a short break. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. When we come back, we're going to talk not only about PETA, but about what the left really wants. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Gun Shop, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. We were talking about bunny huggers. The fact that they used to be so amusing in the 1990s with their cute little antics and their utter cluelessness, but how in recent years they become more strident, more fraudulent, and frankly, more dangerous. This is not the 1990s anymore, and unfortunately, all of the leftist organizations I used to laugh at are now becoming foaming at the mouth extremists who probably have our execution in mind if you give them half an opportunity. Of course, the Humane Society of the United States is, as I said, they call them the spoof commercial that ran on the Super Bowl a few years ago. Lawyers in Cages pretty much says it all. They said, we're basically PETA with suits and deodorant. Yeah, that's kind of true, and HSUS raises millions of dollars, yet spends only 1% of its budget actually goes to animal rights shelters. The rest of it is spent on lobbying to drive livestock farmers out of business and to hinder your ability to hunt. These are strictly animal rights activists, I guess, masquerading as animal shelters. Now, to call them PETA with suits and deodorant, however, somewhat underestimates the evil that is People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. A recent edition of AmmoLand.com, which, by the way, is an excellent clipping service on all things gun and freedom related. I strongly recommend that you subscribe. They ran a piece from a site called PETA Kills Animals. And a sobering piece it was. To be exact, in 2017 alone, PETA massacred 1,809 dogs and cats. Since 1998, PETA's body count exceeds 38,000 animals. Yes, that's right. PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, killed 38,000 animals. These statistics were obtained from filings by PETA with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, or VDACS, and are the sole shelter, and are, by the way, for the sole shelter, and I use those words in quotes, it's really not a shelter, which PETA maintains in Norfolk. In the report on PETA, one subsection is entitled State Inspector Likens PETA Shelter to Euthanasia Clinic. Somehow that gives me the visions of Soylent Green from, when was that made? 1973, where they have euthanasia centers in the world and people can go watch pretty scenes and die. So, anyways, please allow me to read from the report by PETA Kills Animals, and this is on their website. And I quote, "Recent documents uncovered by PETAKillsAnimals.com indicate that the Commonwealth of Virginia was so shocked by the number of animals PETA kills each year that the state inspector attempted to revoke PETA's license to operate a shelter. In 2010, a Virginia resident called PETA to ask if it operated an animal shelter. PETA said no. Apparently perplexed, she sent PETA's response to the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the government agency responsible for overseeing shelters and animal welfare matters in the state. Responding to the complaint, Dr. Daniel Kovich, an investigator with VDACS, conducted an inspection of PETA's animal shelter at its Virginia headquarters in July of 2010. Dr. Kovich determined, quote, the facility does not contain sufficient animal enclosures to routinely house the number of animals annually reported as taken into custody. This is probably because most animals taken in by PETA aren't housed for very long. After reviewing 2 months' worth of records, Kovich found that 245 of the 290 animals, that's 84%, that PETA took into custody were killed within 24 hours. Only 17 were reported as adopted or in foster homes. Kovich noted that PETA's shelter did not meet PETA's own published guidelines for operating a humane animal shelter. Didn't meet their own guidelines. And we should note, by the way, they were saying many of the animals that were being euthanized were not, I guess, they were adoptable animals, cute animals, if you will. To continue, at the time of the visit, Kovich found a mere 3 animals were in PETA's shelter, which apparently consists of 3 rooms, yes, 3 rooms, on PETA's 4th floor, nestled amongst cubicles and conference rooms. None of the animals available for adoption, and PETA's representative indicated I guess none of the animals were available for adoption, and PETA's representative indicated the shelter was not accessible to the public. So really they have no interest in having these animals adopted. They just take them in and euthanize them. But it gets better. Kovich reviewed the disposition of cats and dogs that were either euthanized or adopted/transferred out in the previous 6 years, and found that the adoption/transfer rate at PETA's shelter dropped from an already embarrassing 14% in 2004 to an abysmal 0.7%, 0.7% in 2009. In other words, of the 2,317 dogs and cats in PETA's shelter, get this one, 99.3% were killed. I guess that's contrasted to no-kill shelters. 99.3% of the animals that went into PETA's shelter were euthanized. They were killed. Based on this investigation, Kovic made the following determination. And I quote, "The findings of this site visit, support the assertion that PETA does not operate a facility that meets the statutory definition of an animal shelter, as the primary purpose is not to find permanent adoptive homes for animals." So, why do PETA employees take in animals if the purpose is not to get them adopted out and get them into happy homes? If the purpose is just to kill them? Oh, but you're going to find it gets better than that. As we will see in just a few moments, PETA has actually settled lawsuits for kidnapping pets and putting them to death. That's People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They're not just militants against you and I, which I guess could be understandable. They're actually killing the animals they purport to want to save. We're going to take a break in just a moment, but when we come back, we're going to talk about why a leftist organization would do something like that, why they would kill those they purport to represent. But right now, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. After our break, we will resume with our discussion of the dangerously radical animal rights movement, the unethical actions of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and what the left really wants. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. In our last segment, we detailed how People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, far from being ethical, actually violated Virginia regulations, and since 1998 has killed approximately 38,000 animals that it has taken into its Norfolk, Virginia, and I will use this word in quotes, shelter, which, by the way, does not even meet the standards that PETA publishes for animal shelters. PETA's excuse is that they don't run a traditional animal shelter, but instead take in animals too sick or injured to survive. But that's a lie. If it were true, why did PETA recently settle a lawsuit for $50,000 with a family whose chihuahua was lured from the porch and stolen by PETA workers and almost immediately euthanized? This was a family pet, by the way, and it traumatized their young daughter who owned the chihuahua. Maya, I believe the chihuahua's name was. By the way, PETA even initially denied having workers in that area until they were confronted with security camera footage. Oops. Indeed, the vast majority of animals taken in by PETA are killed within 24 hours, despite Virginia's legal requirement that they be kept for a minimum of 5 days. Among other PETA's other transgressions, in 2003, in more than 15 states, I love this one, the group handed out graphic comics entitled "Your Mommy Kills Animals" to children who were accompanying women wearing fur outside holiday performances of the Nutcracker and other theatrical shows. Let's traumatize some children at Christmas. Isn't that nice? I guess given that they hate Christmas too, I suppose that's a twofer as well. Additionally, the PETA Kills Animals site points out PETA connections to violent extremists, including the following nuggets. PETA gave grants to arsonist Rodney Coronado and his eco-terrorist group, the Earth Liberation Front. Former PETA vegetarian campaign coordinator Bruce Friedrich told an animal rights convention that, and I quote, "blowing stuff up and smashing windows is a, quote, great way to bring about animal liberation," adding, and I quote, "hallelujah to the people who are willing to do it." In 2002, PETA President Ingrid Newkirk told the Boston Herald, and I quote, "more power to SHAC," that's the violent group called Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty, "if they can get someone's attention." 6 of the SHAC's core members were subsequently convicted for their attacks on businesses, with 4 serving between 3 and 6 years in jail. The PETA Foundation was formerly run by Neil Barnard, president of the misnamed Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. PCRM had been linked with FBI-designated terrorist groups, including SHAC and the Animal Liberation Front. In 2001, Barnard co-signed a series of threatening letters with the U.S. president of SHAC, who was convicted on federal terrorism charges in 2006. Dr. Jerry Vlasic, an ALF press officer who is known for openly, and by the way, that's in quotes, press officer, who is known for openly advocating the use of violence to further animal liberation goals, was a PCRM spokesman when he first called for the political assassination of medical research scientists in 2003. They don't want you using animals for medical research either, because after all, humans aren't important. PETA also gave $2,000 to David Wilson, then a National Animal Liberation Front spokesman. And finally, at least as far as we know, PETA paid $27,000 for the legal defense of Roger Trone, who was arrested for taking part in an October 1986 burglary and arson at the University of Oregon. Here's the question. What does PETA want? They're willing to kill people and destroy businesses to save animals, yet they kill the animals they say they want to save. They want them liberated, I guess, but I guess they're willing to liberate them by killing them. So, why? What is it that PETA and other leftist organizations want? I mean, let's face it. Here's the bottom line. And it's what PETA shares with the other leftist organizations. Here it is, folks. The dirty little secret of the American left. PETA isn't about saving animals. As we documented, PETA kills animals. Black Lives Matter isn't about saving blacks. If it was, It would be celebrating Donald Trump's economy and the reduction in blacks out of work to historic lows. Antifa isn't about stopping fascism. Hell, Black Masks and all these people are fascists. And, of course, the Southern Poverty Law Center isn't about reducing either poverty or racism. I could name many, many more, of course, but the bottom line is that they all share a common goal of undermining and destroying not only American society, but Western culture. Why? Because to build something, in their case, their desired socialist utopia, their Walden on Earth, they must first destroy the structure they want to replace. This is basic Saul Alinsky. So when you hear Democrats argue against a border wall, for naturalizing illegal aliens, and for sanctuary cities, understand that this is not a coincidence. When the leftists falsely scream, "Hands up, don't shoot," and deliberately scare police into not enforcing the law, after which, of course, homicides go up, that is not a coincidence. And when leftists of nearly all bents riot on college campuses against speakers they don't like, suppressing the free speech they claim to support, that is not a coincidence. No, this is not a grand conspiracy. Like I've said earlier, most people aren't bright enough to successfully foment a conspiracy. Now, what we are experiencing are the latter stages of the Long March. The effort begun by Marxist intellectuals in the first half of the 20th century to take over, and see if this rings true, to take over our schools, our media, and our cultural institutions. As one of my Grassroots North Carolina board members once said of conspiracy theories, you don't have to be a member of the choir to sing from the same piece of sheet music. The American left can be broken down into useful idiots and the manipulators of useful idiots. Most of the idiots you hear spouting nonsense about racism and sexism are the former. But if you want a classic example of the latter, the manipulators of useful idiots, watch Senator Charles Schumer as he delivers a speech. On his face, you will see the expression of someone who knows he is lying. But he says it to further the collectivism which will place people like him in positions of power over people like you, because that's what it's all about, power. Who rules whom and how. So take your notions of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and chuck them out the window. This isn't Civics 101, it's urban warfare. The right needs to worry less about playing fair and more about what will happen to us as a people if we lose. And I can assure you, time is growing short. My name is Paul Vallone, and you've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Check out my website at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, where you can find both my writings and early editions of the show. Also, you can check out our YouTube channel and find early editions of the show there as well. Otherwise, see you next Sunday at 5.